He had been at sea for a prolonged period of time, approximately 135 miles away from the coast of California, when he noticed something peculiar in the water. When he initially saw it, he believed it was some kind of rubbish, perhaps a tire or a piece of netting that was floating around. But as he got closer, the object began to bob and paddle. It moved in opposition to the waves, rather than in tandem with them. The dog was a German shepherd, and it was swimming by itself in the broad ocean. Caleb stared, and then his breath caught. His heart was beating quite fast. No land or ships could be seen anywhere in the vicinity. It was paddling with every ounce of power it could muster, just keeping its head above the waves. What on earth was a dog doing out here in the middle of nowhere? Immediately, Caleb yelled out and maneuvered the boat in the direction of the target. That moment would eternally alter the course of both of their lives, even if he was unaware of it at the time. A life ring was thrown into the water by Caleb, who yelled out to the dog, "Come on, buddy, you can do it." The exhausted German shepherd turned its eyes towards him and kicked its legs more forcefully, both with the intention of reaching the ring. When the dog finally stretched its paws and hooked into the floating device, Caleb held his breath in anticipation of the moment when his strength would finally give out. In a cautious manner, Caleb brought the ring and the dog in the direction of the boat. The animal was obviously weary and covered in a significant amount of water. While Caleb was lifting him over the side, the dog slumped onto the deck, coughing and shaking throughout the entire process. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, he just lay there panting, eyes wide with tiredness and dread. Caleb wrapped him in a big blanket and sat beside him, smoothing his damp fur. "What the hell happened to you?" he whispered. The dog was strewn with open scrapes on his feet, a large gash on his back leg, and the stench of salt and desperation. He did not have a collar or an identification tag. A few drops of water and several pieces of dried fish were given to the dog by him. The shepherd gobbled it down with a ravenous appetite and then laid his head on Caleb's knee. That unspoken act, that fleeting moment of trust, struck Caleb more forcefully than anything he had experienced in the years that followed. The dog was scrutinized by Caleb in greater detail. On the dog's damaged leg, he applied antiseptic with a gentle dabbing motion. Although it flinched, the German shepherd did not attempt to escape. Rather than speaking loudly to the animal, Caleb talked softly to himself. "Someone left you out there, and you swam. God, how long were you out there?" The dog blinked slowly, as if he understood every word that was said. A profound anguish was felt by Caleb, who had served in the Navy and was no stranger to adversity. It wasn't only a rescue operation. A miracle had occurred. The dog had made the decision to survive. It had made the decision to swim through miles of icy, empty sea in order to have a chance at existence. And in spite of every bizarre circumstance, their paths had ultimately crossed. That nightfall, when Caleb's boat finally arrived at the wharf on the mainland, there was already a small throng that had assembled. Using maritime radio, word had spread about a man who was bringing in a German shepherd that had been rescued from a great distance out at sea. Workers at the dock, fishermen, and even a local veterinarian waited with fascination. People gasped not only at the location, but also at the story 135 miles, and someone mumbled in amazement as Caleb carried the exhausted dog in his arms. The expression on Caleb's face was solemn as he nodded. After carefully positioning the dog on a blanket, he brought it closer to the veterinarian, who immediately began examining the animal. Not long after the notebooks were in hand, the authorities arrived. The questions came in a hurry. Where exactly did you locate him? Was there a boat in the area? Were there any indications of distress? What he could answer was what Caleb did, but the majority of it was speculation. There are no identification tags and no microchips. He hardly lifted his head as people bustled past him, but the dog was powerful despite the tiredness that had set in. Something was not falling into place. There was a more nefarious explanation for the condition of his paws than a misplaced pet, as evidenced by the residue and burns that were there. When Caleb felt it, he felt it in his bones. However, this dog did not go overboard. Even though he was thrown away, he managed to avoid sinking in some way. The riddle started to become clear again the following morning. A tip from an unknown source was received by the local veterinarian's office by telephone. The caller stated that a man who was aboard a private yacht was observed acting inappropriately toward a German shepherd. Just a few days prior to embarking on the journey, the description was an identical match for the dog. The information prompted officials to do additional research. Within a short period of time, satellite data revealed that a vessel had traveled along the same stretch of water where Caleb discovered the dog. The registered owner of the boat is a wealthy businessman who has a precedent of receiving complaints regarding the mistreatment of animals. Nothing has ever been demonstrated up until this point. As the officers pieced together the information, Caleb listened. Almost certainly, the dog had been beaten and then dumped like junk after being thrown overboard. Nevertheless, the dog did not perish. Rather, he swam for miles and miles. Nobody was surprised by it. From what the veterinarians could tell, he had been swimming for over 2 full days. Motivated by something more powerful than the sensation of pain, guided by instinct. Pure determination to survive despite the fact that his muscles were strained and his pads were torn, his heart had not given up. The community was engulfed in popular fury as the truth became more widely known there. Many people shed tears as they read about it, and the story was picked up by news outlets. On account of the fact that he had been at the center of everything, Caleb couldn't help but feel both admiration and grief. It's not enough to say that this dog survived. He was a warrior as well. Once they were back at Caleb's house, the German Shepherd, who was now known as Storm, started a new chapter. During the first few days, there was little activity. The eyes of Storm, which were half closed but watchful, would twitch in response to abrupt movements as he lay by the fireplace. In the evenings, Caleb sat next to him and read aloud while serving him small morsels of food by hand. He did not encourage him to do anything. At a gradual pace, the dog started to react. There was a gentle nuzzle here, and a tail wag there. There was a delay in the formation of the bond. In the tumult that followed the calm, it was constructed one moment at a time. Over the course of his years at sea, Caleb had witnessed a great deal, but witnessing Storm regain his trust was a unique experience. It had an ethereal quality. When Caleb thought about how Storm ended up 135 miles offshore, he couldn't quit thinking about it. His inquisitiveness prompted him to get in touch with the marine patrol teams and animal shelters in the area. He had been calling and digging for several days before he finally got a lead. It had been 2 weeks since a little seaside hamlet had reported a lost German Shepherd that matched Storm's description. However, the story did not end there. An incident involving a boat was noted in the report. A storm sank the boat that a young couple was using to go fishing with their dog. The couple had taken their dog with them. After clinging to rubble for several hours, the couple was eventually rescued, but the dog that they were under the impression was never located. They thought he had drowned in the water. The meeting was arranged by Caleb. The couple's jaws dropped when they spotted Storm when they got at the location. Suddenly, the woman fell into tears, and Storm, who had been so reserved, came straight to her with a joyful bark. In real time, it was like watching 2 hearts that had been broken mend themselves. As Caleb stood back and watched the reunion occur, he was divided between happiness and a nagging sense of grief. But what Caleb didn't anticipate was what the couple said next. They told him, "You brought him back from the impossible." He knew that this was the proper thing to do because Storm was back at home. "We would consider an honor if you were to become a part of his life." Over the course of many days, the story of Caleb's meeting with Storm began to spread like wildfire. The incredible story of survival and the love between a man and a dog who had crossed the bounds of distance and fate brought a great deal of fascination to people from all over the world. When Caleb posted a picture of the reunion on social media, he did not anticipate receiving a lot of likes, shares, or comments. However, he was surprised to see a rush of them. Almost immediately after the news outlets became aware of the story, major media outlets began to make contact with Caleb in order to conduct interviews. It was not merely a local tale. Rather, it was a sensation all over the world.